And hopefully they will be soon. Oh, there's Sandy.
Yeah. All right. Sorry
Meeting
for
is
that.
being recorded.
Yes, thank you. The meeting is being recorded, and I'm going to need some help calling on people because I have a limited amount of, I can't see who's raising hands, or maybe I can. All I see is initials. But anyways, so the meeting, our July Land Bank Commission meeting is called to order at 8:36 a.m. The meeting's being recorded, and we'll begin with general public comments. I do want to say that later in the meeting, we have a public comment session set aside for public comments related to the Glenwood Inn acquisition. So if you have anything to speak about regarding that, please hold your comments until that time. So this time we'll take general public comments. Please identify yourself and what island you live on, and raise your hand if there's a little raising hand tool in a bar there. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak. See a hand. Barbara Sharp.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm Barbara Sharp. I live on San Juan Island, and I am an enthusiastic recreational user of land bank properties.
Great. Did you have a specific comment you wanted to share with the commission today?
Well, I want the land bank to continue their mission with preserving land for recreational use in particular. And I was glad to see the new acquisition of the property on Orcas.
Great. Thank you, Barbara, for joining us today. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a comment? Please raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol on the toolbar. I see another comment with initials P. Who is P?
Is that me, Peggy? Could be me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let's go with Peggy.
Oh, it's Peggy with an N sound at the end. That's okay though, no big deal.
Peggy. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Orcas, and the acquisition, this recent one, is like the best news all year long for me. I'm so thrilled that we have that now as a beautiful, pristine resource, and I'm very much in favor of, saving it for enjoyment of nature and restoring what needs to be restored for our beautiful earth. That's all I want to say. But thank you so much for all the work you have put in. I know you put in a lot of work. And I also want to say, I think the way that the two entities work together, the Preservation Trust and the Land Bank, that's a beautiful thing. And I want to applaud you for working together all this time the way you have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate those comments, Peggy. We have a hand raised by Dana Roberts.
That's right, that's me.
Okay.
I'm from San Juan Island. I've lived here since 1976, and so I've seen tremendous changes in the island, and especially the increasing development pressures. And I think that the land bank has been a true godsend to all of us. And this is kind of odd, but I really can't afford to travel to beautiful national parks. And the fact that I have such beauty here, right where I live, is just an immeasurable gift. And that is due entirely to the land bank and the leadership in the land bank, starting with Ruth Mann, who was a director who was wonderful, and continuing now through Lincoln. It's just been stellar. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dana. Are there any other members of the public wishing to make general comments? I see a hand raised, initials AG.
Alexandra.
Good morning.
Alexandra, okay.
My name is Alexandra Gayak. I live on Orcas Island. I'm new to land bank meetings, but recently just became aware of the controversy over trying to use part of the land bank's Glenwood Inn acquisition for affordable housing. And
So
can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I just want to say that this portion of the public comments is really for general public comments, not related to that specific
All right,
acquisition.
then I wanted to say in general that I'm excited that the land bank exists. Totally appreciate all that you do. I'm a lover of nature and want to see it preserved and conserved and restored everywhere in the islands. And so thank you for what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And another hand is raised. If there's, could I ask someone if you're not speaking, we hear some background noise, to just mute yourself? We got a lot of people on the call. Thank you. Hand raised, initial K.
That might be me. This is Kevin Ranker. And I just wanted to say how supportive I am, not only of the land bank, but by the team at the land bank led by Lincoln Borman, who has just been a stellar and tireless advocate for our community overall for a long time. And I think that credit is due there, and we should all recognize that and make sure we thoroughly support our county staff, and particularly Lincoln, in the tough job that he has.
Thanks, Kevin. Cindy, you're muted.
I muted myself. Okay. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. Am I missing anyone? I don't think so. Nope. All right. Then we will move on to approval of the June 17th meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes to be made?
Yeah, Cindy, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
On page 3, the second section down, there's, in the second paragraph, there's a sentence: Lincoln believes the context has changed since 2008 based on property value increase and development, but that $3 million could be a possible lower bound. Just for whoever wrote the minutes, I understand what that means, but I don't think it's clear for anybody who doesn't. The $3 million possible lower bound. I think we mean to say that we have had an internal policy of keeping a $3 million reserve in the acquisition fund. And I'd just like that clarified.
Okay, that's a good point.
Conservation fund, I meant to say.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any other commissioners with corrections to be made to the minutes? there's no other corrections, then the June 17th meeting minutes are approved. We'll move on to chair and commissioner reports. Are there any commissioners wishing to make a report at this time? Please raise your hand. This is, I see a hand raised, but it's a member of the public. We're looking for commissioners.
It's Jim.
This is Jim Skog in
Oh.
the
Okay.
in the conference room here at the Parks and Recreation Office.
Okay, got it.
I just wanted to chime in that I have not been, there hasn't been a recent meeting of the, what do we want to call it? Sustainable,
Environment sustainable.
environment.
Sustainability.
We're gonna get this right one of these meetings.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I've been, staying in touch and getting all the, whatever information comes out and whatever discussions are happening online. Just paying attention, but there hasn't been another quarterly meeting yet. So more to come on that later.
Great, appreciate it, and thank you, Jim, for tracking that and staying involved. Any other commissioners with a report or update to be made? Other than that Krista is on a boat floating somewhere in Desolation Sound or on her way up there. Thanks for joining us, Krista.
All things are good here.
Good. All right. Okay, if there are no reports, then we will move on to a county council update from Christine Minnie. Christine?
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, there. I couldn't get my camera to come on, but I did. Thank goodness. I am here in my office, not in my carfus, thankfully, on this lovely Friday. And at this point, I am simply going to do my typical county infomercial for you all. So I'll start by saying that the county has hired a new director of human resources, which is a big relief for many people because we have been without one since the beginning of the year. Her name is Angie Baird, and Angie was a finance and human resource director for the Snohomish E911, a regional dispatch center for Snohomish County and all of its cities and first providers. Angie will begin, I believe, next week if her travel and moving schedule stays on course. This week's council regular meeting was held on Waldron Island. We actually traveled there by boat, obviously. And this was the first Outer Island meeting since the onset of COVID. Therefore, the first Outer Island meeting for both Cindy and I. The community was really incredibly kind, and including providing a potluck lunch that took place after the meeting itself. It was really great to get to know some of the people that we don't get to see every day. County Public Works, along with MEM Enterprises, began a culvert project this past Tuesday, which was on Beaverton Valley Road on San Juan Island. The work was anticipated to last the week or a full week, but was reopened after repair in just 2 days. So well done, Public Works and MEM. It was a deep excavation across the road and a complete culvert replacement, which we all know is really important given the recent damages that we have sustained on all the islands from storms. Solar panels installed on the main building at the fairgrounds have been live since the end of June, roughly, and there will be a small celebration for that completion next Friday, July 22nd at noon at the fairgrounds. If anybody would like to attend to know more about the project and its benefits. Speaking of the fairgrounds, the log cabin that we all know and love is going to get a much needed facelift and renovation beginning next summer through the work of the Historical Museum Director, Kevin Loftus, with help from the Parks Director, Brandon Cadwell. A nonprofit called HistoriCorps will be traveling to San Juan Island and organizing the process through which several things will be accomplished, including a total roof replacement and replacement of all sill logs. The part that I like the very most, I think, is that it may even return to its most historic self by resurfacing the logs to remove the white paint. Last but not least, I recently joined Mr. Thomas, Mr. Tompkins, and Mr. Ryan Page in a joint meeting with the town to formalize a request for proposal to be released shortly in the endeavor to facilitate the creation of an affordable housing complex on the Argyle lot across the street from the land bank offices. And with that, I turn it back to you, Sandy.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
informative and succinct.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, a little bit ahead of schedule, and that's not a bad thing. Let's move on to Aaron Rock, who will be presenting our second quarter financial update, or his update. Aaron?
Thank you, Sandy. Let me share my screen. Still trying to wrap my head around presenting in a hybrid setting. Okay. Well, as Sandy said, this is the second quarter financial update for the year 2022. As a notice, the budget figures in these financial statements reflect the first amended 2022 budget, which was approved by the commission on May 20th, 2022.
Aaron, could I ask, is there any way you can make it just a little bit larger? Is there any way to zoom in just a little bit more?
This is.
That's it. Okay.
As I can get it. Is that okay?
Okay. Thank you for trying.
Yeah, of course. And then the first amended budget was approved by the council on June 28th, 2022. So just recently. First financial statement we're going to look at here is for the Conservation Area Fund. In the second quarter, our total cash decreased by $613,000. One of the things you'll see throughout these financial statements is primarily the impacts from the acquisition of Glenwood. So that's kind of the theme for this one here. The LGIP, or the Local Government Investment Pool interest rate, is still well below 1%. Not a lot surprising with that. As we head down to revenues and expenditures for the Conservation Area Fund, one of the larger items of note here is the 1% real estate excise tax. At the end of June, we sit at 2.9 million, which is a really strong start for the year. As you can see, we are budgeted for 4 million still at this point for the entire year of 2022, sitting at 72% thus far. And also in terms of where we line up with 2021, which was a record year, we are only 9.7% below this point last year. We did take out a loan or receive an interfund loan from the stewardship fund in June to help acquire the Glenwood Inn property, and that was at $3 million. That is also part of a 3-year repayment debt schedule, which can be reflected down here in expenditures. We will make the first $1 million debt payment in this calendar year. And then the last main item of note here is under acquisition costs in June, totaling $4.8 million. And as I mentioned, that is for the primarily for the Glenwood Inn purchase. And as you can see, budget has been reflected to accommodate that acquisition. On to the Stewardship and Management Fund. Cash decreased, increased $164,000. What did increase was the amount of funds that we do have in the LGIP, sitting at $1.7 million after liquidating those funds, $3 million of those funds as the loan from Stewardship to the Conservation Area Fund. And as mentioned, that will begin to be repaid here in 2022. Revenues and expenditures for the Stewardship and Management Fund. Not a lot other than normal activity. We do have the second quarter transfer into site enhancement from the Conservation Area Fund in the amount of $512,000. That was done in May, and that is the number that was divided by 4 for each quarter based on the approved budget by the Commission and the Council. So we are on track there. Under expenditures, Stewardship Management, again, we are reflecting the impacts from the Glenwood acquisition. That is the $3 million loan that was transferred to the Conservation Area Fund. And then property and management maintenance for other preserves. We are sitting at $147,000 for the year at this point. That is 23% of the budget so far. And then I will note site enhancement, the $26,000 there in June. That is the beginning of the electrical upgrades at Kaufelt Farm. So we are currently under contract and have begun that process. And that is everything for second quarter financial update.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioners, questions for Aaron? Raise your hand so I can see you. There are no questions for Aaron. Is that correct?
He's done a fabulous job, and there's no need for questions, I guess.
That's what it sounds like. It was very, very easy to follow. Thank you. And it's encouraging to see where we are at midpoint through the year in terms of rate income. So thank you. Thank you for making that clear.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the director's report. Lincoln, acquisitions update.
Thanks, Sandy. We've just got one thing on our plate at the moment. This is the Hauschka Katy Mountain property, which you're all familiar with, but there are a lot of people on the call who probably haven't heard of this one. Unfortunately, I don't have a map teed up, but it is 40 acres directly at the top of Katy Mountain and connected to the rest of our preserve there, which would be accessed eventually off of Three Corner Lake Road. So we've been working on trying to bring this one through the door. It looks like we're closing in on it. We had some questions from the prosecuting attorney's office over format, particularly of the deal, because it's a seller financed transaction. So that's raised a few questions. I think we finally figured out how to bring this to conclusion, and the PA's office has located a neutral attorney, I think out of Bellingham, who probably is going to act as the closing agent on this. So we'll be closing with a down payment of $200,000, and the seller will be financing the rest of the $600,000 over a 4-year period. We'll have a promissory note which guarantees them that we'll be making those payments. With that acquisition, the total acreage of Katy Mountain here in San Juan will be, I believe, up to about 460 acres. So it's quite getting to be quite a significant conservation area, and hopefully we'll be able to finish this transaction off end of the month or midway through August, something like that. But glad to get it back on track. And that's all I
Okay.
have.
All right. Well, obviously, I have allotted entirely too much time for everything. But what I suggest that we do, if everyone is comfortable, is that we jump ahead to the, can we jump ahead to the stewardship report and the outreach and volunteer report? What I don't want to do is start the Glenwood Inn discussion prior to 9:35. And I had extended this meeting from 11 to 11:30 to allow for enough time, but we may get through everything and be done by 11. So if we could go ahead and have the stewardship report, please. Brian has a very cute kitten. Who is
Good morning,
presenting?
everybody. Charlie
Okay,
here out in the
Charlie.
field.
Okay.
I'm just going to begin and introduce Brian, or pass it on to Brian. Sorry, I'm out in the field pulling weeds. Thought I had a bit more time. So
yeah.
We've relating to the Coffelt Farm lease proposals, we've had a sub Land staff and commission review committee. As most of you know, we had one strong proposal one proposal total from Lum Farm, interim lessee. So we reviewed their proposal and followed up with some questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who is on the subcommittee, to follow up with our decision and recommendations.
Thank you, Charlie. I guess before I make a motion, I'll ask if there are any other committee members. The committee was myself, David, and Krista. Krista's away, and also Charlie and Peter. Any other comments on the application you'd like to make?
None from me.
Okay. For me. Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept. And I would move that based on their well-prepared proposal and their successful operation during the current 2-year interim lease period, I move that the commission accept the application of Eric and Amy Lum, operating as Lum Farm LLC, to continue to operate the Kaufeld Farm and direct staff to move forward with negotiating a 5-year lease with a 5-year rollover provision to be brought back to the commission for approval.
Okay.
I
That's
second that motion.
Second, okay. Let's have a discussion. I believe you have your hand raised. Do you have a question about the motion?
No, but the last meeting we had, there were some negotiating points that the commission or the committee was going to talk to the Lums about. So I was just curious what the outcome of those points were, which I think, as an example, included sort of compensation for the work that they do on behalf of the property. And I don't know if those points are appropriate to discuss now, but we had talked about it. So I was wondering if you'd be able to share the outcome of those.
Brian?
Well, it was not part of the negotiation, and that's why it is charging stuff more appropriate to negotiate with the Lums. My own feeling is that negotiation should continue with the Lums, and that I don't think we're ready to discuss those points at this point. I will say that I stressed in my motion a 5-year lease with a 5-year virtually automatic provision. The Lums asked for a 10-year lease, but we had specified a 5-year lease with a 5-year rollover in our one of the reasons for that was that we wanted to be assured that the land bank in 2 years, that is, that the land bank will continue to renew that lease for the Lums. So the over is just a check to see that there are any issues for him. As I say, it's virtually there are no obstacles.
Brian, if I could interrupt you for a moment, at least I'm hearing stops and starts, and I'm wondering if you turn off your video, if we would be able to hear the full. I'm getting the gist of what you're saying, but I wanted to see if we could smooth out what we're hearing.
Okay, I will do that. I'm getting some flashing on my screen too, so maybe that's what's happening. So what I'm saying is that the commission has proposed in its request for proposals a 5-year lease with a 5-year rollover. So it's virtually a 10-year lease, and I think that will satisfy the land bank's needs as well as the loan. That will much the outstanding issue. I see Peter has hand up, so
yes, Peter, you have something to add?
I just wanted to add that to Miles' question, and that capital improvements made on the property will be run through the county procurement process. There's always routine maintenance that the lessee will be responsible for, but capital improvements will go through the regular process. So
the regular process in terms of bidding process, is that what
the procurement rules that apply to the county and the state, for doing capital improvements.
Okay, got it. So at this point, I believe I'm supposed to restate Brian's motion so that we can take a vote, and it was what am I hearing?
Would you like me to restate it, Sandy?
That's what I was going to ask. Would you please restate the motion?
All right. My motion is this: based on their well-prepared proposal and their successful operation during the current 2-year interim lease, I move that the commission accept the application of Eric and Amy Lum, operating as Lum Farm LLC, to continue operating the coffee farm and direct staff to move forward with negotiating a 5-year lease with a 5-year rollover provision to be brought back to the for approval.
Okay, thank you. And we have a second already from Krista. So now, commissioners, all in favor of the motion? Raise
Aye.
your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. The motion carries and we direct staff to begin negotiations of the lease. Thank you. This was a long multi-year process getting to this point, and I think very thorough and well worth it to go through all the steps that we did. And with outside help from the CART committee, many hours. So thank you all for helping us get to this point. This is exciting. All right, any other items on the stewardship report to highlight? See, Doug McCutcheon is here. Do you have something you want to add, Doug? No?
No, not anything in particular. Things are going well. It's that crazy time of year. Maybe one fun thing, we had a volunteer work party yesterday, and a couple of new people doing some noxious weed control out at Mount Grant in the site that is going to be where we're doing the landscape scale restoration project. And this is kind of project that's focused on Gary Oak associated habitat. And very fun. We found, most likely, I need to get confirmation of this, but a plant that, boy, it just kind of got on my radar last year. It's one that was believed to have been extirpated from the islands, and it usually is known to be associated with serpentine soils. It's Harvest Brodea, I call it Indian Valley Brodea in the common name, but it's Brodea cornerea rosea. And we found just one just by chance. One of the volunteers was a botanist, and we were talking about this other Harvest Brodea that's much more common. And I just looked down and went, oh my gosh, look at this. So kind of fun find out there in the field. And again, just one more thing for that area, sort of buoying our choice to be doing some good restoration work. So fun little observation from the field.
Great. That is exciting. Any other? I see Amanda from Lopez District 3.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. This is Amanda on Lopez. I thought I'd just give an update on some of the activities that we've been doing down at the Watmow Addition. There's, been quite a few things happening just kind of behind the scenes and on the ground. So we, in the last newsletter, had an announcement, and we had tour dates or guided walks that people could sign up for. So we did our first one of those in June, and we have another scheduled for July and August. The June one had a wait list, and so we ended up just bringing in a larger group, and people were really happy to see the site and hear about what we're doing. A lot of questions about plans for the house. And so we're going to have to look at that more closely to understand what we're going to do with that. And there's some very creative ideas. But the current status of the house, when we were trying to get it set up for a caretaker, I found locations in the house that had lead paint. So I'm still waiting for a quote on removal of the lead paint in the living room and bathroom. And also still waiting for feedback on the electrical systems. We're also on the list for the well to be repaired. The water system is functioning, but there's a leak at the well head. So we're on the list, but not sure when he will get to that point. And then we will also need to make a decision on the pump house, which would essentially need to be rebuilt, but kind of waiting till the well work is completed. And then, the house may need further repairs structurally. So just trying to get that looked at and understand the scope of how much work and what it would cost. The ecological assessment is also underway. We have Quiat working out there, and they have several assistants, and they've also deployed some remote monitoring, like acoustic recorders, to log birds and bats and other terrestrial creature. Sorry. And they also have an underwater recorder deployed between the property and Boulder Island. So if like whales or possibly fish sounds could get detected. We're looking at completing the cultural resource assessment, and this is possibly the Bureau of Land Management is interested in doing that, but I have not been able to finalize what that would look like. So we are still pursuing the two sources of funding for this project, which is state grants, the Salmon Recovery Funding Board, and ALEA, or the resale to the Bureau of Land Management. So we're also trying to align our activities with either of those possible funding sources. Sorry, I'm looking at my list trying to make sure I've got everything. We've done quite a bit of just general site work on the property, including cleanup, loads to the dump, noxious weed work, and mowing. I have also met with several of the neighbors to just kind of address some of their concerns. There was an informal trail that had developed between our existing Watmow Preserve leading out through a neighbor's property to the addition. And so we signed and closed that and have heard that it's been a big improvement, that there's a lot less people just wandering through their property.
Good. Oh, okay. Thank you, Amanda. I see Peter has his hand raised. I have one question for Amanda. You mentioned prepping for grant applications or funding, and you said ALEA. What is ALEA? Yes, Lincoln.
On this. ALEA is the Aquatic Lands Enhancement Account of administered by the Recreation and Conservation Office. So we've sought ALEA grants in a number of projects and been successful. We were able to get one, for example, on Judd Cove. That was some time back, but we've used this program quite a lot. And basically it ensures that the property is protected, and in particular the shoreline area is protected from any kind of development or other issues. One one interesting thing about this grant, we would have to basically make a carve out of the cabin and probably the garage shop structure as well. It's not much of an area as far as the property goes, but if we're going to go forward with this grant and have it appraise out properly, it would probably mean giving up that development right to the cabin, which given the condition of the cabin may not be a bad thing. Doesn't mean we can't use the cabin for an interpretive area or something like that, but using it as a residence would go by the wayside. So but it's one of those things you have to consider in grant applications.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And also Amanda for very thorough. Sounds like a lot is going on there. Peter, you wanted to speak?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so for those on the call who don't know me, I'm Peter Gioze, the preserve steward on Orcas, and have the pleasure of taking the Glenwood acquisition over the next several years through its hopeful transformation into a great preserve. But much like Amanda, I'm just spending a lot of time teeing up various assessments, cultural resources, ecological, a close look at all the buildings. The site is at this point secured and posted, and I'm meeting with all of the surrounding neighbors. We had a good response to our good neighbor letter, and by next week, I think I will have met with everybody immediately around the property. So, and that's going very well. People are very interested, and I think we have some good partnerships developing there. I'm working with Tanya in our office to develop a splash page for the land bank website, which just will include some information about the property and a planning timeline subject to multiple revisions. And I hope to start offering tours of the property maybe in a week or so, and hoping to do several tours a month that people could sign up for and drop in on. So I think things are going really well so far. There's a lot of maintenance to do down there. We took the property on when the grass and thistles were already waist high. So, and there's a lot of random fencing that makes mowing it impractical, risky. So we have to clean it up before we can really do any significant mowing of the fields. But yeah, things are going well, and I know we're having a longer discussion about Glenwood, so I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, at this point, what I'd like to suggest is, let's see, we have 10 more.
Looks
Yes.
like Miles has his hand up.
Yes, Miles.
Hey, Sandy. If we have a couple minutes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. It's related to the stewardship report. I noticed that there was a forestry workshop at Mount Grant that I'm not sure who was held for, but there were some forest health issues that were discussed. So I was curious if any of the staff that are on this call attended or familiar, just to give just an update on what's happening with the forest on Mount Grant. I'd be curious to hear that.
Sure, I can kind of take a swing at that. I actually wasn't there, but kind of helped set things up. So this was sort of a funny workshop. It was originally planned to be on Orcas, and things got kind of complicated with logistics. This was a partnership between the Conservation District and the North Sound Extension of Washington State University. Initially, it was sort of billed to me as they were interested in doing Gary Oak habitat, sort of looking at issues just surrounding that in general. And they proposed to doing it at our Beaverton Marsh Preserve. which really doesn't have any of that sort of habitat type. And so just kind of based on the general sort of things they were interested in looking at, and locations that could support that, Mount Grant worked reasonably well in that we could park enough people and kind of just look at some similar issues. It wasn't necessarily specific to Mount Grant. It was, I think the intention was doing a little bit more generalized look at forest health issues in the islands, and we sort of took advantage there of moving through different elevations where the lower slopes have a little bit of music forest and some more sort of Douglas fir mixed forest stands, moving into woodlands, and then sort of those savanna bald complexes near the top. So that was sort of how it was structured. My understanding was they had 20 some odd people sign up to do the event, but only maybe 4 or 5 people actually showed up for it. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I figured. Thanks, Doug. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So at this point, we're going to take a break until 9:35. Did anyone have any other questions for the stewards, any commissioners about the stewardship report? No. Okay, we're going to take a break and we will come back at 9:35. Okay, the meeting is called to order, back to order, returning from our break. And I'm just checking to see, are all commissioners here? Are we missing anyone?
Sandy, I know Krista was having some issues and she's trying to get back in on her cell phone right now.
Okay, let's wait just a moment.
And just for the sake of introductions, here in the Parks office or conference room, we have Aaron's here, Tanya's here from staff, of course. I'm here as a commissioner, and we have a member of the public, Ron Z.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
just
Thank
should have
you.
done that at the beginning, but
Yes, thank you, Jim.
Sandy, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, I'm on my phone and I'm not sure exactly how to mute myself, so I will try to keep things quiet over here, but I'm on.
we can probably mute you if you want.
I can do it if you want.
Sure, but then I won't be able to raise my hand.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I just sent you the link again if you want to try entering from a different way. It's
Let's
up to
just,
you.
Okay, yeah.
let's just keep Krista on, and if there ends up being an issue, Krista, then we'll let you know and you can try to log back in. How does that
Sure.
sound?
Yeah,
Okay.
just carry on.
Because there may not be any issue at all. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to begin with a statement for me that I've written, and I'm happy to afterwards have this included as an attachment to the minutes. I only just finished it last night, so it didn't get sent out. But this portion of the meeting is to discuss the Glenwood Inn acquisition. The good news is, since our last commission meeting in June, the people of San Juan County have become the owners of this spectacular piece of shoreline property on Orcas, also known as the McPeak parcel. If you ever hear that term, it's referring to the Glenwood Inn property. We have Lincoln, the land bank staff, our partners, the San Juan Preservation Trust, and their generous donors, and the county council to thank for making it happen. This is news we're celebrating, and we should be planning festivities as soon as we are able. So we need to keep this in mind. This is all good news. As you can imagine, there were a lot of moving parts in bringing this deal together. And at our last meeting in June, Angela Anderson of the Preservation Trust made an unexpected statement that prompted me and two other commissioners to examine what had taken place a few days prior at the county council meeting in regards to this project. It turns out that there were some serious inconsistencies between the trust's vision for the future conservation easement and the council's resolution that states their intent for that easement. I've spent the intervening weeks on a fun fact-finding mission to identify those inconsistencies and how they came about. And today is our first opportunity to meet and discuss this as a commission and begin the work needed to ensure there's a better process of communication between all parties for future shared acquisitions. To be clear, despite these issues that will go into detail, what I said at the top stands, the people of San Juan County are now and forever proud owners of this amazing piece of our shoreline. As for the inconsistencies, from what I can see, after spending more than 60 hours conducting a forensic review of a paper trail, watching recorded meetings, and speaking to people involved, There was no malintent, but a major communication breakdown about the expectations for the yet to be defined easement, namely the extent of the easement and the reservation of building rights. Keep in mind, this was a complex, time-sensitive transaction completed in the midst of a frenzied real estate market at record pace, especially given a government entity and multiple partners. It's truly amazing that it came together. But now we have some important housekeeping to do. And this discussion today is just the beginning. We anticipate meeting with the county council, or I anticipate meeting as a commission with the county council and the Preservation Trust in the coming weeks to sort things out. But first, there's a dynamic here that everyone should be aware of. The land bank would not have been able to complete this purchase without our 50% partners, the San Juan Preservation Trust. Both organizations have gone out on a limb, extending themselves financially, borrowing against existing assets to secure this property for the county. The trust has applied for a grant to help complete their purchase of the conservation easement. And in addition, they're embarking on a 3-year, or what may be a 3-year fundraising campaign. So what's not helpful is having folks spread rumors and create controversy around this project. It could undermine the trust's ability to fundraise. The land bank will have to make up every dollar that the trust won't be able to contribute. And they're a valuable partner to us. They've contributed at least $20 million that I can count towards acquisitions and stewardship of our properties. We should do all we can to support them. So please, if you find yourself in a situation and you hear someone repeating something, well, I heard this, do what you can to just temper that down. It's unfortunate, but it's a miscommunication and we're going to get it straightened out. Okay, now into the weeds with the details discovered since our last meeting. And I just want to kind of state these as clearly as possible so that as we begin the discussion, we're all starting from the same knowledge level of kind of the basic underlying facts. So there's indeed a difference between what the trust envisioned for the Glenwood Conservation Easement they'll be purchasing within the next 3 years and the language that was adopted into the deed acceptance resolution number 13, 2022 during the county council meeting on June 14th. In addition, there's a conflict between the resolution and the land bank's Glenwood Inn project summary, a project summary that was twice approved by the Land Bank Commission and the council as part of the land bank's budget in public hearings. So let's look specifically at the two conflicts that bring us to this portion of the meeting. The resolution passed by the council states that, quote, the conservation easement will be limited to protection of the shoreline of the North Shore only and is expected to restrict development in that area, unquote. Whereas the land bank's project proposal and its cooperative agreement signed with the Preservation Trust do not mention restricting the conservation easement to the shoreline. The project proposal and the cooperative agreement use broad sweeping language such as, quote, permanently protect the property's conservation values in open space with a conservation easement and, quote, perpetual conservation easement over the property. Further, the trust's grant application clearly states the conservation easement will be over the entire property. Number two, the Preservation Trust's intent and their grant application states that the conservation easement would extinguish 10 of the 11 development rights that come with this parcel, whereas the council's resolution states that, quote, "It is the county's intent to retain at least 2 development areas on the upland portion of the parcel," unquote. In the context of the recorded council meeting discussion, what they mean by the term, my interpretation of what they mean by the term development areas is more accurately described as development rights, which means an interest in and the right to use and subdivide land for residential purposes. The term development area could be interpreted to be just a building zone. Like, for example, on Cowfelt Farm, we have certain building areas. So it's one big piece of property, but you're allowed to build over here. But when you review the conversation that was had, the discussion between council members, what was being talked about was really better described as a development right. So the county council's intent is to retain, with the resolution, to retain at least 2 development rights, and the preservation trust planned conservation easement contemplates only relinquishing or only having 1 development right remaining. And the land bank is interested in retaining that 1 development right in order to potentially convert the existing barn building into temporary conservation worker housing, which would be an allowable use under the land bank mandate and ordinance. We haven't gotten into the details of that, the feasibility. It's just an idea, but that's the reason why we wanted to retain the 1 development right. But the purpose of the second residential development right that the county council seeks to retain is for the potential future subdivision into a second lot that would or could be used for county employee housing. Not only does that second development right conflict with the trust's intent and their grant application, holding back a second development right will reduce the appraised value of the conservation easement. Consequently, the amount the Preservation Trust pays the land bank would likely be reduced, in which case there would be a misuse of land bank funds. According to real estate attorney and former longtime commissioner Doug Strandberg, if acted upon, this would result in, quote, "the land bank using its REIT funds for unauthorized purchase of land rights for the county for a use not permitted under our ordinances and totally at odds with the land bank mandate." Before anyone jumps to conclusions, there are 2 important aspects I discovered while creating the timeline of discussions about this purchase. So keep these points in mind when you consider the conflicts that I just mentioned. Number 1, the June 14th hearing was not the first time that the county council had expressed to staff their desire for a second building area for potential county employee housing purposes. Note, however, the Land Bank Commission, who have been discussing this project in public meetings for nearly a year, was not made aware of these desires. So the important thing is this was not something that the council came in and just came up with that idea right on the spot. But the Land Bank Commission wasn't aware. Number 2, the county council was not informed either during or prior to the June 14th meeting of the Preservation Trust's intent of the conservation easement to protect the entire property and extinguish 10 building rights. The council was not reminded that the future subdividing and resale of a portion of the property was not part of the initial project description that they had twice approved as part of the land bank's budget. And any change to that project description would have needed to be vetted by the commission and the public in a public process. Because just as the council doesn't have the authority to do a line item amendment of the land bank's budget, and that's per the ordinance, they don't have the unilateral ability to modify the intended use, subdivision, or resale of a land bank property. Further, they were not informed that retaining a second building right for a non-conservation purpose would in all likelihood be a violation of the land bank ordinance, which restricts the use of REIT funds. The council entered that June 14th meeting believing what they were asking for was feasible and reasonable, and no one advised them otherwise. Today's meeting is the first attempt to understand how we got here, what we need to do to fix it, and how to prevent this disconnect from happening again. I'd like us to focus on the following discussion questions, one at a time, and hopefully we'll end up with a roadmap of where to go next. First, what next steps should the land bank take with respect to the Preservation Trust? Second, what recommendations should the Land Bank Commission make to the County Council? And third, and we may not get to this today, what policies, procedures should the land bank put in place to ensure communication disconnect doesn't happen like this again? We're going to keep this an orderly, respectful discussion. This is not a rant and rave session. Our focus needs to be on moving forward positively and productively. So please raise your hand to talk. Please wait to be called on before speaking, and we'll allow before we allow a commissioner to speak again, we'll wait till we've heard from everyone. You can ask questions of Lincoln and he'll respond. However, our council liaison, Christine Minnie, who is here, is not able to speak on council's behalf on this matter, as the council has yet to meet and discuss it. So please don't direct any questions to her. And the members of the public will have the opportunity to speak on this issue and comment during the public comment period, which will be immediately following the break. So thank you. I know that was really long, but I felt I needed to kind of lay that groundwork before we began this discussion. So get my discussion points here and raise your hand, commissioners and staff. Commissioners, if you would like to, what you'd like to say, ask, consider. David Myland. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. That was a great summary that you gave, and you raised some legal points in there. And it makes me feel the lack of Doug Strandberg here to help us understand exactly what the parameters are. I guess my first reaction, though, and this might be just totally nuts, is can the council rerun their meeting on the resolution to accept the deed and alter that to conform with the intent of this commission? And I don't know the answer.
Well, I believe resolutions can be amended. I've seen amended resolutions, but that's a good question as to what actually would need to happen. Doug, I'm sorry. You know what it is? I'm looking for the little hand raise. Yes, I see the waving.
That's Jim.
Jim.
Well, I think really the the bottom line here is that this resolution in its current state is, what do I want to say about, it's basically, I think it's unenforceable because it's an unauthorized use of funds. And so it needs to be amended.
So if I could just clarify, and I'm not an attorney, but after talking to Doug, what I understand is that the resolution itself isn't, the resolution and the closing of the transaction in and of itself is not the misuse. It is if the exercise of, it says the county's intent is to retain at least 2 building sites. We haven't even gotten to the point of the conservation easement. So what he's saying is if the intent was followed through and the second building site was retained, then that would be cause for misuse of funds.
But the
yes.
resolution is contrary to our mandate.
Yes, correct. That's
which is state law. So yeah, I mean that's where I'm at. I don't know about the other commissioners.
Lincoln. You're muted.
I think there's an important clarification here that reserving development units is one thing, and we clearly are reserving 1 development unit around an existing structure. It's another thing to reserve the ability to subdivide the property, which is really what would be required if the property were going to be used for something other than conservation purposes. You really need to subdivide it. You could not utilize a second development right in the context of land bank ownership. And so that was something that we did think a lot about at the beginning of this process. And you have to remember, this was a absolute, I don't know how to describe it. This is one of the most difficult deals I've ever been part of, quite frankly. At the beginning, we had no idea how we were going to come up with the money to make this project work. We had no idea who the partners might be, who would be involved in it. But we did do certain things, like we did have Opal, the community, the housing, affordable housing group on Orcas, come out and take a look at the property. Their conclusion was they weren't interested in it really, and also they had big questions about the water capacity on the property. We had the Lummi Tribal Council come out and take a look to see if it was something that they might be interested in. And so we went through those steps and hoped that we could recruit another partner to this effort, but that just did not happen. And so by the time we did the budget to make the first time we did the budget to make this acquisition, that's why that project summary looks the way it does. It basically, there was no provision for subdividing the property. It was a purchase by the land bank with the Preservation Trust purchasing a conservation easement. And so I think as we got way down the road on this one, options which might have seemed good at the beginning, and frankly, everybody involved in this process has good intentions, honorable intentions. There's just there's no bad actor here. But as we got toward the end and the pressure of this deal ramped up to really needing to close on the transaction, we had this disconnect where I think I, at some point, should have really, well, we needed to be clear with the council exactly where this project was heading. By the same token, the nature of the Preservation Trust conservation easement changed as they went out and looked at grant funding. They're really trying to tailor it toward that funding source, and the funding source only applies, that conservation easement only applies to a specific area of the property, but it references the rest of the property and the need to have a conservation easement over the rest of it as well. Just a separate easement, basically, from what would be held under the terms of that grant agreement. Very, very complicated. I can see Sandy's
I'm trying to following that last one, but that's okay.
Yeah. I think one of the issues here was that the grant proposal made to the Puget Sound Action and Recovery Fund specifies that grant is applying to the shoreline area of the property. And that was done for a reason, because any structures that might be in an area that are covered by that grant agreement would have to be demolished. And we were looking to retain at least one of those structures. So excluding it from that grant area was important. But the grant application also references a conservation easement to be held by the Preservation Trust over the entire property, eliminating 10 of 11 development units. So it's just, it's inordinately complicated on many different levels. And I think that's the part of the issue. And we were operating in the context of really pretty much desperately trying to come to agreement with the seller. And once that happened, trying to figure out how to get to closing. Things get quite hairy, really, toward the end of these deals, and I think that's pretty much what we're wrestling with here.
Jim.
Sandy, this is Krista.
Yes, Jim, I see your hand raised, but let's go around and see before we get back to you, see if anyone, Krista.
So I just have I have a question. Given that your first question is what the next steps are for the land bank and the Preservation Trust, I guess I'm left with the question, and I know Christine can't talk for the council, but I guess my question, first question is, how does the council intend to proceed on the initially expressed desires on at least 2 development sites? Is there, I don't know if there's much use in the Land Bank and Preservation Trust discussing what we're going to do going forward unless we know what the council intends to do, because if we can come to a compatible agreement on revising the resolution to meet the situation, then that makes the steps forward easier or clearer. But if the council will remain adamant on seeking the feasibility of some kind of site on that property, and then that sends us in a different direction. So I guess I just don't know. I know we can't answer that today, but I'm just stating what I think we have a first step.
First step.
Question,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
that makes sense, Krista. Thank you. Miles, you had your hand raised, and so Vicki, and I see several, maybe others of the public. I'm gonna save your comments for the public comment session, if you could. and it's confusing when I see a bunch of hands raised. So I don't know if you know how to unraise your hand, and then we'll wait till after the break. Okay, next would be Miles. Miles, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the great explanation, for spending all the time doing the research, Sandy. That's very, very helpful. I think, so my understanding is that there's a conflict right now where the council is asking for one thing and the Land Bank and the San Juan Preservation Trust are asking for something else. And our relationship with the San Juan Preservation Trust and the conditions of the property sale are dependent on going through with what we thought was happening with the property with the one development, right? So I guess you're asking what our recommendation to the council would be. My recommendation would be that they amend or withdraw their request for considering a second development option with, as Lincoln said, the subdividing, because it's in conflict with what we were doing and established with the San Juan Preservation Trust, and it's also, as Jim pointed out, not necessarily an option that they don't necessarily have the right to modify it in that way if it uses REIT funds for something that they're not meant to be used for. And my personal opinion too is that it's a misuse of the property. I understand that there's multiple interests and goals that the council has for achieving in the county, but it's somewhat like a U.S. senator asking the U.S. Postal Service to deliver bombs or something like that for the DoD because they happen to be going in that direction. Like, it's not really maybe a separation of goals and objectives for land bank property with other goals and objectives that the county has, I think. So my personal thought is that it's not really an appropriate use of the acquisition. And so my recommendation to council would be amend to withdraw that consideration. And I would, strongly reinforce the idea with the San Juan Preservation Trust that we are supportive of their conservation easement and their goals, and appreciate the risk that they're taking in this purchase and want to support them. So we'll stand by them if that's possible to do, but I don't know what the actual steps would be to move forward, depending on what council does. So that's my thoughts.
Great. Thank you. So I see that Lincoln has hand raised, but then it says, oh, Brian, there you go.
Sandy, it looks like Lincoln may want to respond to Miles' comments. I'll yield.
Go ahead, Brian.
So I'd just like to reiterate what strike me as the high points of your introductory presentation, Sandy, because it was long and complex, just as this deal has been long and complex. The issue here, I think, is miscommunication, three-way, and I guess I would say missed communication. The first point, and I think the salient one, is that what has been asked by council, or at least by a council member, is, as several commissioners have stated, is completely contrary to the land bank's statutory mandate. We cannot buy land for housing, period. Now, Lincoln mentioned that early on we explored partnerships with various groups, including Opal, for affordable housing. That would have been a completely different deal. We were looking for a funding partnership, in which case, as Lincoln said, the land would have had to be subdivided and sold to Opal or another group. We could not use land bank funds for that. If council had the desire to develop affordable housing on a land bank and trust acquired preservation site, we would also have to subdivide that land, and council would have had to come in with a plan to do that. And in my view, come in with earnest money in an early partnership. That was never done. In fact, we as a commission were all completely caught aback by this. We had never heard any proposal from council or any interest in developing affordable housing on the site. Council never came to us. Council member Wolf may have communicated to Lincoln a desire to do that, but again, there was never a plan. Council.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. I don't know where that feedback is coming from.
Everybody mute yourself, please, except for Brian. Somebody's smoke alarm?
Okay. I think that is our smoke alarm. I apologize.
The cat jumped on the smoke alarm?
You never know.
The cat's on fire.
What I was saying is that council had every opportunity to come to the Land Bank Commission and present an idea, present a plan, and get that vetted by the commission. It would have been a possibility, but I don't think council ever had a plan as a council, and certainly never came to the commission. And so communication between council and the Land Bank Commission was absent. Also, neither council or the Land Bank was apparently represented well by the prosecuting attorney's office. My understanding is that our regular I'm sorry, can people understand if I go on?
It's painful, but we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. Our regular representative, John Kane from the PA's office, has been absent with COVID, and we had an out-of-council attorney representing us, so we never knew. Finally, the Preservation Trust was completely left out of the communication loop. And there was obviously, as you said, no coordination between the land bank and the trust on what we were putting out in terms of the conservation easement and the grant. So there was real gaps in communication all the way around. That does need to be solved in the future. But I think, again, to circle back to the original point, developing housing on conservation land is not within the land bank's statutory mandate. We can't do it. And so I would agree with Miles and the other commissioners, David, I guess, said it, that our request of council is first and foremost that they amend or retract their resolution of June 14th to reserve a site for housing. It just doesn't work.
Thank you. So who haven't we heard? I know I see you, Jim, but we're not through everybody yet. I wanted to ask if Mike had any comments to this. And I think you might be muted.
I'm trying to stop that. Give me 1 minute.
Okay, all right. How about we jump over to Jim? We'll go to Jim. Go ahead.
All this discussion is really good, but if I can maybe boil it down to one or two statements, and I think really what it has to do with is the timeline. And, you know, our project summary presented to council some time ago had all the details. And I think if the council wanted to interject something, some use as they did, that should have happened at the beginning rather than at the 11th hour. We would have probably avoided all of this controversy and rumors and such if that had happened, because we would have been very clear about our mandate and what does and does not happen with that mandate. And you know, I just think that that's really the bottom line, is that, you know, council should have acted earlier if they wanted to interject something like this, but they did not, and it came in late in the game and interjected this these recitals in the resolution. So really, I think that's what the problem was. In addition to the fact of what Brian said about the lack of expert real estate law advice from our representation within the county. I'm done.
Thank you, Jim.
I have a comment if Mike's not ready.
Let's see, is Mike ready?
I'm ready, but go ahead.
Go ahead and comment, Krista.
Well, just to kind of, I was just making some notes here, and I think to piggyback onto Jim, but just to rephrase it maybe, I think what I'm learning from this is that, and I would say this, that I think it's correct and appropriate for the council to focus on anything that provides a mechanism for affordable housing. And I think any project that happens in San Juan County should give consideration to that. So I'm appreciative of their wanting to look at the possibility of housing. I think what became obvious is what Jim is saying is that they should have, but I'm getting the sense that the correct process or what they need to do wasn't made clear to council. That for them to participate in something that we're doing, they need to be in from the beginning. They need to get notification from us on the project as it begins, because if they're required to go out and come up with a plan and come up with money and do all that, they need to be brought in early, even when the project is kind of in its infancy, so they have time to consider. Council does a lot of good work, but they don't necessarily move really quickly. But I think this particular situation will point out that they need to meet the timeline of a purchase and sale agreement, basically, and that can move quite quickly. So I think lessons learned for everybody is that if council now wants to participate in looking at earmarking and paying for and pulling out a parcel or a piece of real estate from a project, they need to be ready to go. And so that requires us to give them the information from the beginning, and then the onus is on them to get back to us and say, we're interested. You know what I mean? So I'm just throwing that out there. I think to say they should have is a little harsh, because I'm not sure that we all knew what they should have done and how it needed to move. So that's my steps for moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I agree pretty much with everything that's been said. I think that when the council first brought up the idea, or Cindy, that part of this property that we're taking should be used or could be used for housing of employees or affordable housing. And they had consulted their attorneys, they would have found out that that's not practical. That can't happen according to our mandate. We can't be used as a source for things other than conservation. So it never would have gone beyond council. I mean, they never would move to think that we were going to do this, knowing that they'd been advised that it wasn't legal. So I do agree with Jim's comments about communication. And no question, I think Lincoln has said communication is critical no matter how fast a project is moving along. All the parties need to be clear about the things that interest them and how they will look in a deal. So I think there's no question that if you reran this thing, they would find that they can't do what they wanted to do, and it would have dropped. But therefore, I think the only option for them is, with hindsight, is to correct the resolution.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I see, David, you have your hand raised, but Lincoln has had his hand raised for a long time. So I want to hear what he has to add first.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here and say basically, first of all, thanks to Brian for the smoke alarm, because that's kind of how it felt through a lot of this process, trying to get through all of this and keep everything straight with a fire alarm going off. That's kind of very appropriate. But I would say that rather than the commission telling the council that they need to do something, it seems like we have an opportunity here now that we've actually got the project closed and we've accomplished the primary objective. And I think everyone agrees that the primary objective was to conserve this property. Now that we've been able to make that happen, we have an opportunity to sit down, not just with the council and the Land Bank Commission, but with our primary partner, the Preservation Trust, and talk through exactly what we want and what's possible on this property. So that would seem to me to be a logical next step. And that's something that Sandy, I heard you propose. It's also something that Cindy Wolf has written about. So that really seems like a good thing to do. We don't have the time pressure anymore. We're not going to lose the property. So I think we can sit down and have a good measured discussion about exactly where we should be going with this.
Okay. Can I just respond quickly before I call on you, David, before I forget my train of thought that you just mentioned or that you just triggered. So we're not under time pressure necessarily, like you're saying. We have secured the property, but I think we're under a public relations time pressure in that the sooner we have this, the better. So we need to get it straightened out so that the trust, that the controversy goes away, so that the public understands, so that hopefully we get to the point where this can get corrected sooner rather than later, as opposed to hanging out on the books and continuing to cause stories and concern. So just wanted to put that out there. I'm not sure if we should print any letter to the public or anything. That's something to be discussed. But I do think that time is of the essence in this as well. So, David.
I'll pass, Sandy. Let's proceed. Thank you.
Okay. So, any commissioners do want to?
I have a question for Lincoln.
Yes.
Lincoln, so are you, and maybe it's appropriate to ask whoever is on for the Preservation Trust, but when we have secured the property and now you say we have the time to sit down with Preservation Trust and council to see what we can and what is possible, is that the sentiment of the Preservation Trust, or does that mesh up with what they, my concern is it would be great if we have that time. They do have a grant application in that speaks differently than the resolution, and so that seemed to me to be the most immediate issue. But so I'm just wondering if there is actually, I like the idea of everybody sitting down and trying to work out this specific situation and then looking forward to the future, but I don't know if we really have that time or if the trust has that time.
So thank you for that question. And what I would suggest before we bring the trust in, because we're closing in on our time frame here, is I think that that after this meeting, we're as soon as possible going to be having some conversations with the trust, and we can start working those details out of a strategy moving forward. What I would like to see happen, contrary to what Lincoln just said about instead of telling council what we want, I think we need to come out of this meeting with an agreement that we're going to write a formal letter to council so that it's on record, and basically making a formal request to amend that resolution to remove the 2 points that conflict with the trust's intended conservation easement and with our project proposal, and stating the reasons why. To me, as opposed to us just discussing it here and then assuming that this is going to take place, I feel like we, as a commission, should make a recommendation, a formal recommendation to council. What do you all think of that? Yes, Brian.
Sandy, if that is a motion, I will second it. And I'll also say that Krista's statement just reminded me that that's the other really important aspect of this, is communication with the trust, and for the trust to communicate or ensure its grant application, and that is very time sensitive. The trust has a grant application in place to secure their portion of the 50% funding partnership. That's critical. The trust has basically mortgaged their house, as Angela put it, and obtained a line of credit, and they are also depending on fundraising and on the success of this grant application to come up with the money to help us pay for the property. If the grant application is not successful, that is financially critical both to the trust and to us. So I think that one of the things that we need to do is to do everything that we can to ensure that the grant application is not jeopardized. So again, I will second your proposal, Sandy, that the commission write a letter to council.
Okay, the motion has been seconded. Let's have discussion about writing this letter, specifically about writing the letter. I see your hand raised, David. Do you want to make any comments? I'm not sure that we need a formal motion. I think a consensus would be fine for something like this. David, go ahead.
I have a question that's it's a tangent. It's not really directly relevant to what you're proposing, but I'll throw it out there. You know, included in our board packet is the resolution that council voted on, and I want to know who wrote that. How do they get the resolution in front of them?
Lincoln, do you want to answer that?
I'm sorry, the question was, how did the resolution get written?
Who wrote the resolution? How did the resolution that comes before the council, how did it come to be?
So most of the resolution was written with our our outside counsel. And it included the provisions of retaining one development unit, et cetera. However, that got referred back to the prosecuting attorney, and I was directed to work with Amy Vera at that point. She had a lot of questions about it and about the cooperative agreement, and we could not come to agreement on that final language in the resolution at that point, which was the night before the hearing. So we went into the hearing with an unfinished resolution, which is something we've never done before and should never be done again, I would say. And that was worked through in council session. If you watched that meeting, you can see council proposing language for the resolution at that point, and that was the final language.
And that was a week prior to closing.
Correct.
Yeah. Or scheduled closing. Does that answer your question, David? And that outside counsel that Lincoln's referring to is someone who has not worked with the land bank before. But am I correct on that?
A little bit, but not much.
Okay. But a basic template was provided to the council. And when I looked back at past resolutions to accept deeds for property on projects that we've partnered with the trust on, the projects where the trust was coming to closing with all the funds had the conservation easement attached to the resolution and all the details were finalized. But there's been projects where, for example, the most recent one was the Lopez Hill property deed acceptance resolution just last year. And it also just said there will be a conservation easement. It didn't specify any details. And the same for Zylstra, other than pricing. So it's not highly unusual for the details to remain vague at that point. And as Angela emphasized in her statement, it's because this relationship is built on trust and history that all parties are acting in good faith. And some things are not nailed down at that time. And they have to be negotiated in the future. So, okay, so with that, I'm wondering, is there anyone who's not in favor of writing a letter with our recommendations to council to amend the resolution? Are there any commissioners that have any more questions about that or think it's not a good idea and we should just let things happen on their own, or what? Jim?
I think it's a great idea. I support it completely. I want to add, though, that I think that it's important that we be very clear, and maybe even with the advice of counsel, be clear about why. we would ask for this resolution to be amended.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Sandy?
Yes, yes.
Krista, so I'm in agreement with the letter. I'm just wondering, given the time frame, are we going to direct staff, or are you going to write the letter with our go-ahead just to send it, or rather than wait for it to come back to the next meeting for us to have read it and approved it?
So
It seems like,
well, I would reluctantly volunteer to draft this letter because I have done all the research and am extremely familiar. I could almost just write it verbatim, but I would want at least one and maybe two other sets of eyes from commissioners before sending it. So if the rest of the commission wants to appoint 3 of us to write the letter with this objective and criteria of what we're asking for and specifically why we're asking for it. If 2 other commissioners wanted to work with me on reviewing the draft and approving it, and the rest of the commission said it was okay, then we can get this done without waiting until our next commission meeting. And just so that everybody understands this, it's the Open Public Meetings Act that makes it difficult. We're not, as a commission, allowed to be circulating emails back and forth about drafting letters. A minority amount of our commissioners can work together on doing it. So what do you think about that idea?
I think that's a great idea. I'd volunteer to do it if you can deal with miscommunication or lack of communication for the next 2 weeks. That's my issue.
I will also volunteer.
Great.
Same here.
Okay. All right. So I'll say me, Brian, and then Krista, do you think you really have access to, will you have access to documents that you can review?
Yeah, it would, if you have another volunteer, maybe from, if David, I heard his voice, if he's interested,
David,
I think
right.
would be the better. Yep.
Okay, let's go with David and you can have a vacation.
that.
Okay. All right. So with that, this portion of the meeting, this Glenwood Inn discussion comes to a close. We will take a break and come back at 10:45 to hear any public comments about about this discussion or the acquisition and what we've talked about. So we'll see you at 10:45. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Okay, where is everybody? Are we here? Okay, meeting called back into order at 10:45, and we're going to take public comments on the Glenwood Inn acquisition. And please state your name and your island would be helpful. And keep your, I'm not sure how many people want to speak, so maybe try to keep your comments to three minutes. And raise your hand and I'll call on you. And I'll try to call on order, but I may not see what order they come in. So I think Kathy Morris, you were first to raise your hand. So why don't you begin?
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I've been, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Kathy Morris and I am from Orcas Island. And I would like to make a few comments here. They evolved as I was listening to the previous discussion. And so there was a reference to the letter. So I hope in this letter that you send to council, it includes some of the comments that the public will now be making. I'd like to define something about the council. When you talk about the council, that they are representing a constituency, that they are not acting on their own self-interest, that they are responding to what their constituency is saying. The land that we're talking about, the Glenwood Inn, like Lincoln said, has been purchased. The conservation easement, the terms of the conservation easement has not been purchased. So there is time. I kept hearing that it was too late for the council to talk about the terms of the conservation easement. I don't believe that that is true. I don't believe it's too late. There's also a reference to the mandate. The mandate, as I read it, is very short. And I feel like this is an opportunity, like every time, for the commission and the public to read and interpret and possibly expand without changing the language of the mandate. I am not an originalist. We hear about this a lot now. I am not an originalist. I believe the mandate needs to be explored and interpreted to meet the needs of our changing community. This is an amazing opportunity for our county to explore multi-use with land bank purchases. We also have to remember that the land bank is county, not just funded by a REIT tax, but it's also part of our conservation futures. There's a little pie that we pay every time we pay into our property taxes. The San Juan Preservation Trust is a private nonprofit that you are partnering with, but you're also partners with your community. Like, we are all in this together. I believe if there's a will, there's a way. And that we can explore this issue with open minds and not just reject the council's, it wasn't a mandate, but it was whatever they did, that is an opportunity to explore and converse with your constituency and not just follow a one track of like, hey, we don't want to listen to the council, because the council is representing the public in this case. Also,
all right, thank you.
I just
Okay,
spoke
yes.
for 3 minutes, but I just have one more thing, just because I
Okay.
went through the whole Kaufelt Farm thing, is like the talk about conservation worker housing and the talk about the mandate as far as housing goes. That's an interesting thing. So I hope that you think about, like, you know, different partnerships and housing. Okay, thank you, Sandy.
Thank you. You're actually right on the dot. Good. Thank you. I have lost track of who raised their hand next. I'm just going to call, I'm going to call Vicki Edwards.
Thank you, Commissionerwoman Friel. I really appreciate the opportunity to provide comment, and just thank you all commissioners for this discussion, and also Commissioner Friel for your research and synopsis of the process that we went through over the last year with the land bank. Really appreciate that work. And Angela Anderson, our executive director, is on vacation and is not able to make this meeting, but she will be back next week. And we look forward to having further discussions with the commission and moving forward. And I wanted to just reiterate what Brian had mentioned with the question regarding the sensitivity of timing of this project. It is time sensitive for us, and being able to fundraise for the project. As you can imagine, it's extremely important when we do put information out to donors for raising dollars for these projects, that we are sharing the most accurate information as possible. We don't like that to change midway through the process. It's hard for funders to commit to projects when there are those sort of changes that occur. And so just wanted to reiterate what Brian had mentioned regarding the sensitivity of time to the Preservation Trust, as well as to our fundraising efforts. And just also wanted to mention that we do look forward to having further discussions with you all regarding this project. And as I mentioned, Angela returns next week, and we'll definitely work with you on scheduling something and getting that on the calendar. Thank you again.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vicki. Let's see, Dana Roberts. You're muted. Okay, go ahead.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
I have a few comments.
Just introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. I'm Dana Roberts. I'm from San Juan Island. First comment is, thank you, Sandy, for so brilliantly articulating the issues. You were amazing, and I really feel like I understand so much now. Second, I really want to thank Lincoln for his guidance in having this purchase happen. I understand from hearing all of this how complex it was, and I'm really glad that he was at the helm. The third thing is that I appreciate what Kathy Moore said about perhaps changing mandates, but that's something that can't happen in this issue. I mean, this is something that perhaps in the future could be undertaken, but it seems that it's irrelevant for right now, that right now the statutory requirements are what need to be followed. And even beyond that, I don't know how many residences under the county council's proposal could be placed on the property for county workers, but I imagine it's not a lot. And this would seem like a really piecemeal solution that isn't worth it, the trade-off to undermine the Preservation Trust funding, to maybe throw the land bank into misuse of funds for a piecemeal project, when actually the council needs to be working on broader issues, and such as the efforts that they took to limit vacation rentals, which are, as everyone knows, a huge driving force for unaffordable rentals. So I think that as it currently stands, the land bank's mission and affordable housing mission are not necessarily on the same page. They're almost opposed. You have land preservation versus development. And until that in some future time is changed, it seems that the current legal requirements and logical requirements should be followed, and have the council rescind their resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana. Who we have next? I see
Sandy, yep.
initials.
Ron Z's hand up is here.
Oh, okay. Ron Z. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ron Z. I live on San Juan Island, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Madrona Institute. And we're very excited about this acquisition. We think it's extremely significant because of the cultural significance of the property. And we're willing to be a partner in looking at cultural interpretation, cultural education, and cultural signage on this property. And I just hope that this kerfuffle over the council resolution can be easily corrected by an amended council resolution, because we would like to sit down with the Land Bank and Preservation Trust staff to be a partner in the appropriate development of the property that helps to build, hopefully, closer relationships between our Coast Salish community and our community. So, and we're willing to put some substantial financial resources behind this based on our budget. So we're looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Ron, for your statement. And I see initials AG.
My name is Alexandra Guyot. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Orcas Island. I am just really wowed, impressed, pleased, relieved after listening to your discussion about the situation with the Glenwood Inn property. I'm so grateful that you're there doing what you're doing. My one concern came up with Krista's comment about including consideration of affordable housing options in potential property acquisitions by the land bank. And I actually don't agree with that idea. I know that there's a huge issue with affordable housing that needs to be addressed, but I don't think it's the purview of the land bank to be involved in trying to find property for that. And my concerns have some have to do with zoning issues, and also just I'm on Orcas. We have a fragile road system here where there's kind of, one road that goes around the island with only a couple options here and there, but large areas that are in the rural zone can easily be cut off by the next flood, are inaccessible to fire management and EMS, have issues of infrastructure that would be very expensive for the county to install and maintain, put in, which creates financial implications for the county. So I think the idea of the rural clusters that people are talking about is a really bad idea. And many of the lands that the land bank would want to conserve are in more remote areas. So I think those two goals don't really work very well together. I think the land bank should stick to what it's trying to do, which is conserve land, and that we should find other ways to cluster housing closer to where there's already infrastructure, where the people are closer to major roads and not out in rural areas. And those, I feel passionate about those issues. I'm really in support of the conclusion that you drew to write a letter to county council about changing this. And I think I agree with putting a house on an agricultural property to house the workers of that property, and to put one on this property to house someone who might need to be there temporarily to take care of this property, but not to create affordable housing clusters for other people on any of these land bank properties. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. All right. Who do we have? Who am I missing here? Is that Kathy again? Let me check and see.
You have Peggy and Amanda Aziz.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see those. Let's do Peggy.
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to keep the camera off. It's just more simple for me to keep my head clear. I'm not too familiar with Zoom meetings, so I'm doing the best I can with that. But I just want to applaud the commission meeting right now. I loved all the clarity, and I feel like the grasp of issues was, just wonderful. And so I'm very, very, I just want to compliment you all for your clarity. And the other thing that, it seems to me that Lincoln spoke about, if the county has a reason for using the property that's different from the land preservation, isn't there already something in place, which was, he mentioned, I think it was him who mentioned, like, you subdivide the property and you sell that portion off so that the Preservation Trust is still doing what it is mandated to do. So it seems to me that I don't see that there has to be any big legal changes, and if I'm wrong, fine, but that's just something that came up to me. So let's see. I'm just very glad that you are all working so hard on behalf of land preservation, and I'm very pleased with Lincoln's leadership of the land bank, and I'm pleased with what all of you are doing. I'm just very pleasantly surprised to see so many wonderful minds at work on this great cause to preserve our beautiful islands. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pegeen, for those very kind comments.
You're welcome.
Amanda
Yeah.
Bruce?
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
This is Amanda Azus. I own property on Orcas and I live on San Juan Island right now. First of all, I want to just say how much I appreciate, Sandy, your analysis of the communication breakdowns. And it seems like that was a very important aspect of what has happened in this project. Also, once again, I'm impressed by the discussions amongst the commissioners. It's just wonderful to see you all in action. And anyway, I'm just very impressed. I wrote a few pretty direct emails to Councilperson Wolf and the County Council and the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And my main concerns about those was what appeared to me to be a lack of understanding of the land bank's process that is not only in our mandate, but also in the regulations that surround the land bank. And I was particularly surprised by the responses I got, which were primarily that the county council is in charge of the final decision, which was never in dispute in my mind, having been a county land bank commissioner for almost 20 years. The other aspect that was concerning to me was that the prosecuting attorney's office didn't recognize that what was being requested was out of scope for the land bank commission. These seem like major errors that could have prevented this whole issue from happening. In the past, the Land Bank Commission has held orientations for newly elected council people. And I don't know if you're still doing that or not, but I think it's a really good way to help people understand what the process is. It also could be expanded to include other department heads to maybe look for partnership opportunities that might come up for people. In fact, this project I think would be an excellent example of showing what not to do and what the land bank can't do. And so if you're not doing that, I would urge you to hold those again in the future for council people that are elected. I think that it's easy for people to forget what the mission of the land bank is and what it has to do to proceed. And this would be a good reminder. The population of our county changes by a third every 5 years was the last statistic I saw about this a few years ago. So the land bank needs to constantly be aware of educating its populace about what it does, why it does it, and what the process is. And I support the direction you're going with regard to the letter to the council. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you for your prior long service as a commissioner to the land bank. I just saw, I'm going to be out of order here because once, let's see, I think it was Maureen. Is there a Maureen?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, please identify
Hi.
and go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm Maureen C. I live in San Juan Island. I just want to make a very brief statement. One, I am eternally grateful for this discussion because it has been difficult to really understand what this has all been about. There's been a lot of grumbling and it's been hard to decipher it. So I'm very, very grateful for this thoughtful group and how you've approached it. I also have, I cannot pretend to say I can understand how these deals are put together, and I have nothing but admiration for Lincoln for being able to translate and make these enormous projects work. So he's something to behold. But I want to throw the ball down the field in a different way because everybody has been saying the same thing. I don't know how to do these deals, but I do know a thing or two about the county council. And I believe in this case, they've gotten really bad advice. And I know that when the county council puts a resolution out, it has to be co-signed by legal. And somebody in the prosecuting attorney's office gave them the wrong information or didn't explain it properly. Everybody here can take responsibility for bad communication, but I would place my hand firmly on that aspect of this. So I hope Chris Minnie is listening and that she'll take that back to council and say, you guys need to check out what advice you're getting, especially around land use. Very, very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen. Nancy Green.
Thank you. I want to echo everybody else's sentiments and say thank you so much for pulling this all together and putting it forward in such a clear and detailed way. I think that was a great help to everyone. And I'm sorry, I'm from Lopez Island, and I used to be on the Land Bank Commission, and I'm now on the Preservation Trust Board. And also to the commission for being very thoughtful in your comments. Again, much appreciated. I would be a bit remiss with Angela out of the room for not bringing up the fact that the resolution includes a 6-month window for negotiating a conservation easement. And her intent, or I think objective, was to have us have the ability to talk over the course of a year. So I would, in drafting a letter to county council, I would maybe rethink or figure a way to keep that out of the resolution. I think that was put in at the last minute and isn't too well with our ability to work through it. So thank you very much, you guys.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, we've got Alexandra Gajek.
It's me again. I just wanted to make, I'm at Orcas Island, Alexandra Gajek. One more comment. I understand that the county council is going to be discussing this issue at their meeting on the 19th. That was what Cindy Wolf told me a couple days ago. So I just thought I'd pass that on in case people weren't aware of that, if it's still true, in terms of when the letter to council goes. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you for pointing that out. Any other members of the public who haven't spoken, who would like to make a comment? Well, I can't believe that we're exactly at 11:10, right where I wanted to be. Okay, thank you all for your comments. All good points. So let's move on to the outreach and volunteer report. Tanya?
Here. Well, I'm excited to say that when I checked my mail yesterday, I got an annual report. So hopefully your postal boxes also have the annual report, or will soon. And let's see, Peter, or maybe Doug, he stole some of my volunteer things, but that's okay because they're volunteering with him. And we have an intertidal walk tomorrow on San Juan Island at Dead Man Bay Reserve. It's, I think, maybe around a minus 2.5 tomorrow tide. So we have a guest speaker, Dr. Erica Iyengar. She teaches on the East Coast at Muhlenberg. She studies sea slugs. And when she's here at Friday Harbor Labs, she's kind enough to donate her time to lead a walk for us and identify all those little critters down in the rocks at Dead Man. So that's always a favorite of mine. 10:30 tomorrow, we meet at Lime Kiln Point State Park in the parking lot. Other than that, been updating the website with collaborating with Peter for things for Glenwood and plugging away for the fair, which I think I put in the stewardship report. And I coordinated the stewardship report this month since we don't have Erin. She's away, and so it's not nearly as nice, I think. The formatting is still good, but she's such a better wordsmith when it comes to that stewardship report. So hopefully everyone still enjoyed it. And that's all I've got.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's nice to see the calendar getting filled out for the summer, having different activities. And as Peter mentioned, he will be leading guided tours of the Glenwood Inn property. He plans to do several a month, so those will get posted on our website, and I would assume maybe press released. And I see hand raised, Mike Pickett.
Thank you, Sandy. I wanted to make a couple of quick comments if I could at the end. Number one is I echo the comments made about Sandy and her effort to put this together. I can't imagine what we would be doing right now if we didn't have such a thorough and just thorough summary of what happened and what the problems are. So thank you, Sandy, for doing that. I think we also owe a thanks to the Preservation Trust. I mean, they're taking this position, in this point, they're taking some pretty serious steps, and we support them 100%. And I think it's a great mutual relationship. And third is Lincoln. I've done some serious transactions in my life, but I haven't had to deal with public and private enterprises at the same time under a short time frame. So, man, we're lucky to have you. I think one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that council, that's a hard job too. I mean, they get a lot of stuff they got to read, and I think that's where the advice of their experts come in. And I would suggest in our letter possibly that they consider designating one of their attorneys to be a liaison with the land bank, somebody that Lincoln can go to with a phone call and say, you know, blah, blah, and they can go to the council with a phone call, and these things can get worked through, because most of these issues seem to me to be legal issues. And every time you do a deal, anything in the deal is a legal issue. And I think that might be helpful. And the last thing is, I hope that you include in your letter, Sandy, the fact that we really seriously would love to hold a communication work group with the parties involved to make sure that we learn from this experience, and that it gets better. and we improve. So anyway, that's all I've got to say. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And I think your point about sort of a land bank dedicated attorney, we've had
No.
Sandy, you're frozen, if you can hear.
I think I could jump in because I'm pretty sure I know what Sandy was going to say on this point. That up to now, we've been really fortunate in having Karen Vetter as a deputy prosecuting attorney who's been assigned to the land bank and now volunteering for us. Unfortunately, she retired at the end of last year. And John Kane has been our designated deputy prosecuting attorney who we've worked with really well. And unfortunately, he's just wrestling with some health problems. And so that's been a big issue with this thing too. It's just the fact that the PA's office is pretty much overwhelmed with everything. And this is no exception. So hopefully we can resurrect that kind of relationship going forward. Well, I think we may have lost Sandy permanently.
Yeah, Lincoln, she has not jumped back in, but if Krista is still on the call.
I'm still on the call. Well,
Agenda.
looking at her, is that Sandy? So Aaron, you'll have to tell me if there's any commissioners with hands up because I can't see anything. I guess right now I would open it up just to continue closing comments from commissioners. If they, Jim or David, Brian, have anything they'd like to add before we close off the meeting?
The item on this is Jim. The only item left on the agenda was future agenda items. So I think we could probably move past that for the moment. And I think that I just wanted to say that I agree with the fact that we've had some really good discussion, some great comments from the public, and let's all move forward here in goodwill.
David, do you have anything?
David's
Or
not there
Brian.
yet.
Yeah, Krista, I'd just like to say thank you to the members of the public that have attended the meeting for your interest and concern for the land bank and above all, your support for conservation. Thank you.
And if Sandy is not back on, Mike said all that I could say, possibly. She's not here to hear me say it, but I will text her. I thought Sandy did a stellar job of this with this whole situation and couldn't be more impressed with that for sure. And my gratitude to Lincoln and all the staff for the work they do and for the Preservation Trust for our many years of partnership. So it sounds like we have a plan going forward, reaching out to council and being back in touch with the Preservation Trust. So hopefully by this meeting next month, we'll have good news to report. And oh, hang on a second, maybe she's calling me.
She just let me know that her internet went down. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just got to. Anyway, appreciate all the public being here. I've served on a lot of commissions and boards in San Juan County since I moved here, and I appreciate your appreciation for the thoroughness and clarity of this commission. They've handled a couple controversial things in the past years that I've been on it, and that is my impression also, that it's just a really intelligent and thoughtful process that we put into things that cause difficulty. And so I'm grateful to be a part of that. Kudos to everybody. And without further ado, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 11:20.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you in a month, if sooner.